So, what is Ayurveda? Ayurveda is an ancient holistic system of medicine over 5,000 years old from India. It includes modalities such as psychological counseling, herbal medicine, psychiatry, and also typical internal medicine and more. But what's important about Ayurveda is that it is a nature based medicine. And it looks at the human being as a microcosm of the macrocosm. So, whatever's happening in your body is happening in the universe too. And anything that's happening in the universe can apply to your body. And so, Ayurveda acknowledges that there can be no harmony in the body if there's no harmony in the mind. So, let's talk about why you're struggling with burnout and mental imbalance. The truth is, we are disconnected from ourselves. We're overstimulated by constant input. And because of that, we start to distrust our own judgment due to mental fatigue and trauma. So in Ayurveda, there are these three essential causes of disease. The first one is when we are doing what we know might not be good for us, but we do it anyway. An example of this is if we are staying up late at night watching television and we are already tired but we just don't want to go to bed. We've had a long day and this is the only time that we have some downtime to ourselves to unwind. And you know that watching the show is going to cause you to be really tired in the morning for work. But you do it anyway. And you end up burning through some of your sleep time. Well, that causes us to become more fatigued over time. And because of that overstimulation, right, we start to rely on that to get by. And the overstimulation makes us more on edge. And we keep hustling and we keep rushing because the more that we do this, the more of that urgency we feel because we didn't give ourselves time the previous day to actually get some rest. And when we do this over time, we start to distrust our own judgment, right? Because we are more and more stressed, we think that we are the problem. And the only thing that can really fix us is if we go to a therapist, if we go to the bar, and we forget that we had the tools in the first place. We just didn't choose to use the tools. So Ayurveda teaches us that mental distress isn't a flaw, it's a message. The problem is that we're not listening to the message, and that makes our system go out of rhythm. So at the heart of it, health is bringing ourselves back to balance. So in Ayurveda, there's a word for perfect health called swastha. But swastha is a Sanskrit word, and the root of this word means being settled in the self. Most of us live far from this definition of health. In the Western model, or in the Western English language, rather, health is defined as the absence of disease. But that's it. It's like if you're not sick, then you're healthy. That's the assumption. So I really appreciate the Ayurvedic definition because it goes beyond just the absence of disease to whether you truly feel at home in being you. And so what I really think Ayurveda is pointing to when they're talking about health is having the self-esteem to proactively bring ourselves back to balance repeatedly over and over again in the body and mind. Because we recognize that the closer that we are to being aligned with ourselves, the more likely it is that we're going to take actions that are serving us. So for me, maintaining health means making sure that my needs are met, making sure that I do practices in the morning, like journaling, or making sure that I'm in bed by a certain time. Now, how do we know what to balance? That is the key. And that's where Ayurveda offers a really cool perspective. So, I want to introduce you to the concept of the doshas. So, Ayurveda is largely based off of the concept of doshas, which are the three physiological forces that govern the body or govern the functions of the body. And each of these are kind of like an archetype for both the way that your body functions as well as your mind. So, your personality, the way that you get stressed, what you look like, how your body functions, all depends on which dosha is dominant in you. The doshas themselves are based on the 5 universal elements of nature according to Ayurveda, with those elements being ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Each element represents a function in the universe. Ether or space is what holds all other elements in place. Right? It's the space for everything else to be. Air element is the element of movement. Anything that moves in the universe is governed by this air element. Fire is the element of transformation and metabolism. Anything that anything that requires transformation, light, heat is governed by the fire element. Water element is the element of cohesion and flow. So anything that requires flow, moisture is governed by water element. And then earth element is the element of solidity and stability, mass. So anything that has mass has an aspect of earth element. So the doshas are how these energies manifest in the body. And each of these doshas are composed of 2 major elements. Vata dosha is the first type of dosha. Vata dosha is governed by air and ether element. So naturally, it's going to embody the qualities of air and ether. So how does that show up in a person? Well, a person who has a lot of air and ether, aka space, a lot of movement, they're going to be naturally enthusiastic and creative, right? Very excited type of people. And when they're in balance, this shows up, right, in their personality and in their strengths. So they're a really good cheerleader. They're really creative. They love to come up with new ideas. And they tend to be a little bit more light and delicate in the body. They tend to have a little bit drier skin because of the 2 elements, air and ether, being very light and dry and mobile. Pitta dosha is going to be composed of the elements of fire and water, with fire being the dominant one. And Pitta is responsible for any type of metabolism in the body, as well as eyesight, because eyesight is governed by light, right? So Pitta dosha has very fiery qualities overall. And so in the mind and in the personality, Pitta types tend to be really confident and driven, intense and focused. And that type of person is going to be a natural leader when they're in balance, right? Because they can get stuff done. Not only that, people who have Pitta dosha as their dominant dosha tend to have a very efficient body too. High metabolism, medium build, and sometimes they even have a little bit of that redness in the skin due to some heat. And finally, we have Kapha dosha. So Kapha is composed of the elements of water and earth. And water is that element of flow and cohesion, whereas earth is the element of solidity and stability. Water and earth together, of course, create mud. So it's going to be a very sticky, heavy, dense type of energy. and also moist. So, in the Kapha personality and in the Kapha mind, that manifests as being caring and compassionate because of that water, nurturing, and also supportive, right? Stable because of that earth quality. And Kapha types, when they're in balance, they tend to thrive in these supportive roles, right? Because they're super stable people. And in the body, they tend to be more sturdy built and they have more moist, oily skin and perhaps softer, larger features. So that's the snapshot of the doshas when they're in balance. So when they're healthy and you're in your element, literally, then you're going to show up as probably one of or two of these types. You can have a combination as well. Now, Ayurveda is all about finding balance. So I also want you to understand what it means for you to get out of balance. So when a dosha is overactive, it creates an imbalance where there's an excess of that dosha. When we start to feel off in the mind, which doshas are out of balance in the mind and body will tell us which energy is out of balance. So rather than our mental flaws being, mental patterns being flaws, they're more like feedback, right? So if you start to feel the imbalance of Vata or the imbalance of Pitta, it's a sign that you need to remedy that. And so in Ayurveda, we talk about balancing out energies. Vata, being air and ether, leads to feelings of anxiety, being scattered, overthinking, overwhelm, right? Because there's so much movement in the mind and too much space in the mind. That signals too much Vata energy. And you get a very like worried type of feeling, very on edge. Now, because of that, when we know there's too much Vata energy, all we got to do is bring it back. We got to add in qualities of stability, of structure, of safety, and routines. And in an environment of stability, structure, safety, and routines, Vata calms back down. And it goes back to being its excited, enthusiastic self rather than its anxious, nervous self. Pitta, when it's out of balance, is going to ignite in fire, right? There's going to be too much heat. And when that happens, a person becomes really reactive and intense and irritable. A person who has too much pitta in the mind is always in fight and fix it mode. So they might be like crossing their arms and they don't like what's going on. They're really mad. Now, when that happens, it just is a sign that they need to really chill, right? They need an environment where they can slow down. They need to be able to forgive themselves and others. And they need some leisure time to get away from the seriousness of all that hard work that Pitta loves to do. When Kapha is out of balance, meaning there's too much earth and water element, it gets heavy. So rather than being its supportive, nurturing, caring self, it gets to be depressive and numb and apathetic and lethargic, right? Kapha's mind tends to get heavy. And so, if you want to balance Kapha back up to a place where they feel nurturing again, they feel like they want to support others again, what they need to do is activate. They need things that are going to light them up, that are going to get them moving again. It's the opposite of Vata and Pitta. They need exercise. They need stimulation. They need sunlight. So now that you know what the imbalance of each of these doshas are, which one feels the most familiar to you when you're stressed? And what do you think happens when you ignore the initial symptoms and signs of imbalance? So let's say if you're feeling irritable and angry like Pitta, what happens if you ignore that? If you don't do anything about it and you just continue to rage and you continue to drive yourself forward? Well, the result is burnout. And I love this image because in the previous slide, we had our doshas feeling a little bit off, right? They're embodying their imbalanced side. But when we drive ourselves too far, what happens is that we lose the energy, we lose the motivation, and we lose our joy. And we get stuck in this place of burnout. Now, just like before, the doshas kind of determine what kind of burnout you get. So, burnout with Vata leads to Vata type symptoms like anxiety and hypersensitivity, panic attacks, like I mentioned before for myself, and memory loss and spaciness. And that all reflects the air and space element of Vata. Burnout with Pitta, right? If you see this image of this flame that has gone up and now it's kind of like a burnt crisp, experiences irritability, a short fuse, and because it's like a flame that um, that burned too quickly, they hit a wall. It's like a sudden fatigue. But also because they dry up their fuel and they lose their heat because it's out, the fire goes out, you also get symptoms of Vata, right? Because Vata is this air and space element. When there's too much Vata, it also causes the flame to go out. So you get things like anxiety, hypersensitivity, and panic attacks also in the Vata, the Pitta version of burnout. And then finally, burnout with Kapha is the most interesting one because it is quite different. And with Kapha, it's all about that heavy depressive energy. And so when Kaphas get burnt out, they get depressed and they withdraw. And often the chronic fatigue that they feel is accompanied with weight gain. Now, all of these are more extreme, advanced versions of just the simple dosha imbalances that I discussed in the previous slide. But they specifically affect the nervous system, the mind, the limbic system, your emotions, and whatnot. And this is how Ayurveda really looks at burnout as an advanced version of an initial imbalance. And just to keep in mind, you can also have a combination of all three.